Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily interview show about the United States. Hello, everybody. It's not really news that World Cup fever is in the air. We just did an interview with Simon Kuper, the Anglo-Dutch journalist, sports writer, whose new book is out. It's appropriately called World Cup Fever. And next week, we're talking to Franklin Foer, his classic book, How Soccer Explains the World, and an Unlikely Theory of Globalization has just been reissued. And today we're going to go fiction. My guest is Dimitry Elias Léger, and he has a novel out, a new novel, just ready for the World Cup, ready for our World Cup fever, called Death of the Soccer God. And it's a novel about the 1950 World Cup. Dimitri, congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
So unlike Simon Kuper, Dimitri has written a book about his experience at 9 previous World Cups, all competitions that he attended. I'm guessing that you yourself weren't at the 1950 World Cup. Is that fair?
No, I was not. But the story of that World Cup is extremely popular in Haiti. And it's a legendary World Cup because it's the first World Cup after World War II. But the legend of the soccer player, the Haitian soccer player who brings glory to America against England, is very popular among Haitians of a certain age.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and pronounce his name. I mean, your novel is based on some real events. A man called Joe. How do I pronounce the final name? Gaëtjens? Gaëtjens, a Haitian footballer. And interestingly enough, you grew up in Haiti, so you're all too familiar with the story of Gaëtjens. I grew up in England, where the story of the 1950 World Cup in Brazil is dominated in England by a remarkable match between the United States and England, which the US defeated England 1-0. The British thought, or the English thought, they were the best in the world. Of course, they weren't. And the astonishing thing about this game in the 1950 World Cup is that United States beat England 1-0, and the winning goal was scored by a Haitian, this character, Joe Gaëtjens. So is this as famous a story for young Haitians as it is for young English people, Dimitri?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. For Haitians of that generation, which would be our grandfather's generations, it's a huge story. And of course, our parents' generation, people born in the 50s, they grew up hearing about this and they passed it on. Because when a Haitian does well abroad, it brings glory to the whole country. And this was remarkable. He was the most famous Haitian in the world for a few years after scoring that goal, that very improbable goal. So I read about him before England played the US in the opening game of the South Africa World Cup. And I thought to myself, oh my God, the story of a Haitian teenager who comes to New York and then somehow makes it in the American World Cup and has a great World Cup and becomes a global star. It feels like a novel I was meant to write.
Yeah, and it sort of comes back in some ways to Franklin Foer's book about how soccer explains the world, an unlikely theory of globalization. In a way, this story is one of globalization. Tell me the story of Gaëtjens and why it inspired you to write the book.
Because it was a familiar story in some levels. He was a mixed kid from a great family, half German and half Haitian. And he was sent to America to study, not to play football. And but somehow couldn't resist the beautiful game and ends up playing for the American team and making it to the World Cup in Brazil in 1950. And there are fun facts, like he couldn't tell his parents he was playing for America in the World Cup. He had to keep it secret. He was not supposed to be playing football, and he's not even American. It just shows to me, once I saw that, I just had to imagine what his inner life was like, what the conflicts was like, what the story of an immigrant, a Haitian immigrant in Haiti, in New York City in 1950 could be like, and what it's like to move from Port-au-Prince to New York City to Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Imagining those travels and the adventures that came with them proved irresistible. So I thought about this novel 16 years ago, and I finally wrote it last year, and I'm happy to share it with the world because it's a great immigrant story. It's a great globalization story before the term globalization even existed, and it's a romantic story. In a time when Haitian immigrants get mixed receptions around the world, not just in America, this story reminds you that immigrants are capable of astounding feats and bringing glory to the countries they live in surprising ways. And Joe Gaëtjens, or in my novel's case, Gilbert Chevalier, is the unlikely hero's international adventures.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a polemical element here. As we speak, Iran is supposedly negotiating to move their World Cup matches from the United States to Mexico, given the US-Iran war going on at the moment. What's the politics then of this novel? All novels, of course, have politics, but is there something political in terms of your decision to write this book? It's the follow-up to your 2015 hit, God Loves Haiti. So you put a lot of work and time into this.
Yes, it is. It's took 10 years to write my follow-up novel. Although it was an idea I had before I even wrote the first novel. I guess if there is a political angle, I basically write novels that ask the question, does God exist? And if God exists, how do you square that with the poorest people on earth? Can God love Haiti? Can God love Haitians? Haitians are one of the most hated people on the planet, and have been for a long time. Can God love Haitians? And the first novel looked at the idea of faith and politics in Haiti after a devastating earthquake and a massive humanitarian disaster. This looks at a Haitian. This is like a genius. This is a genius story. This is a brilliant athlete who his gifts proved to be. You move from Haiti to New York, and his gifts proved to be strong enough to impress the world. And then he goes back to Haiti, and his life gets even more complicated. So there is a political story, but the political story is always in pursuit of the philosophical question: is when you move around the world, what keeps you steady, and where do loyalties lie? What is loyalty when you're a genius? What is loyalty when you're gifted? What is loyalty when you're wealthy? Who are you when you move between worlds and you move between classes and you accomplish great things?
Yeah, and of course, when it comes to who are you as a Haitian playing for the United States in this foreign game, which he picked up in Central Park, or he learned in Central Park. You ask about whether God loves Haiti. I wonder whether also there's a God element in terms of football. A lot of people call it the beautiful game. Do you think one of the reasons, Dimitri, that it's called the beautiful game is because it's so simple, and it could even be something that God would love?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the reasons it's called the beautiful game because we use hand-eye coordination for everything we do. Every 2 seconds of our life, every waking hour of our lives, we're using hand-eye coordination. Football is the only arena in our lives where foot-eye coordination is the dominant skill. It's such an unlikely skill, such an improbable skill, and it's such a wondrous skill to behold. Yes, there is a magical element to it, and there seems to be a spiritual element to it. Those who saw Pelé play in Sweden in the 1958 World Cup final feel like they saw something miraculous. And people who saw Maradona play in '86, in the '80s, Maradona juggling a football is the most amazing thing. Same thing with Zidane. When Zidane caresses a football and rolls it around, it makes no sense. It seems miraculous because your feet are not supposed to be that graceful, and you're not supposed to be that coordinated and that in control using your feet to make other people miss to score goals.
Yeah, and the God element's interesting. You bring up Maradona, of course, in that '86 game against England, another English humiliation. It's the story of English football, maybe the English nation. Maradona famously described his handball goal as the hand of God. So there's that element there. It's interesting in the book, which I enjoyed very much, Dimitri. You imply, or maybe your fictional character implies, that the game didn't really come from England. The English always thought they invented the game, but you note it may have come from China, which sort of adds to the global element of this game, which Franklin Foer so brilliantly describes in his book, How Soccer Explains the World. Is it the global game? Is that what you concluded in your research and writing of this book?
It may be the only sport that has its roots in China, became commercially massive in England and Europe, and the best team in the world in the sport since 1950, since it became globally popular, since the World Cup was invented, is Brazil, a South American country that's mostly black, and it happens to be the one sport in the world where a non-European country is the best in the world at it for generations and generations. So yes, it is the most global sport in that regard. Invented in Asia, commercialized in Europe, yet mastered thoroughly by Brazilians and Argentinians in South America.
And of course, it has a strongly musical quality, which means that the hero of your book is also a very musical character. Some of the book takes place in New York City and Harlem. He meets Miles Davis, other famous jazz musicians. Is there an intimate connection in your mind and in this book between music and football?
Certainly between music and football and jazz, football and samba, the improvisational nature of footballers, moving with their feet at great speed, stopping and changing and going slow. I mean, just watching penalty shootouts. You watch penalty shootouts, you're watching a concert, but you're watching like a bunch of jazz soloists taking chances at trying to defeat the keeper. Yes, there's a huge element between football, and that's why football highlights work extremely well on YouTube, because you could watch 5 minutes of Messi and you're watching a concerto. You could put any music in the background and you're watching a concerto. You're watching an artist, a tiny guy dribbling around the giants of Real Madrid, around the giants of Manchester United, and scoring goal after goal after goal. Messi scored a header. That was so operatic when he scored a header against Manchester United in the Champions League final. No, football has musical, operatic elements and theatrical elements that are hard to reach, because football players come in every size, every physique, and they get it done in
Right, and
improbable
they're
ways
small. I mean,
each
when you
time.
think of Maradona or Messi, they're not large men, and even Pelé. We did some shows. There was a book written a few months ago, Dimitri, about the greatest footballer in history. And we had interviews with several journalists who had contributed to this book. And of course, the debate is between Pelé, Maradona, and Messi. In your view, are one of those clearly the greatest?
No, it would be for my money, it would be Cristiano Ronaldo. Because with his size and speed, he covers more of the pitch than any of those three guys. and he had the endurance to last a bit longer, and get more things done in more varied ways than Messi did.
Although of those three, if you added Ronaldo to that trio, turned it into a quartet, he's probably the least poetic, isn't he? The least musical of those three.
Yes, Pele is the most musical, and Pele is the GOAT. And Pele is key for the sport's popularity. Because when I was researching my book, and I thought about including Pele as a character, because Miles Davis is a character, Pele is a character in my novel. So is writers like Aimé Césaire and other celebrities who make cameos. But Pele's cameo was interesting because one reason why football and Brazil is the most popular team in the world is because Pele played and was excellent in the first World Cup final that was televised. The first World Cup final that was on TV was the 1958 one in Stockholm, and he was 16 years old and he scored a hat trick. And Pele looks like a typical Haitian kid, typical African kid. He looks like more of the population of the planet, and that helped football get so popular. And Pele introduced the world to the bicycle kick. And so he made the sport appear like ballet and appear like art and music. And he brought in the Brazilian style, the Brazilian flair, and samba, which was also growing in global popularity in the late 50s and early 60s, also accompanied Pele and Brazil's great success as they won three World Cup championships in 12 years.
Yeah, and Pele, of course, was in all those 58, 62, and 1970, maybe their greatest team when they won in Mexico.
Yeah, and they lost the final in 66 against England.
Well, I don't think they were in the final in 66, but they certainly won in 1970. What about the issue of justice in football? There's certainly an element of justice about the United States defeat of England. Back then, this wasn't the United States of Donald Trump. It was a different kind of United States. It was made up of a part-time team of amateurs, three guys, including your Haitian, who weren't even US citizens. There was a certain kind of justice to it. The English, always arrogant, of course, were shown that they weren't quite as good as they thought they were. But justice doesn't always manifest itself. Even in that World Cup, the final in 1950 in the Maracanã Stadium in Rio was one of the most famous matches in history because Uruguay beat Brazil. So the tournament in 1950 ended with a kind of injustice. The Uruguayans were maybe the most European or physical of teams, where of course the Brazilians were just Brazil.
Justice in sports is a tough concept because sports, wealth helps most of the time dictate who wins in sports. Football is uniquely unjust because anybody could win a World Cup final. Everybody can win in one game. And the wealthiest team doesn't always win. The wealthiest country doesn't always win. The favored nation doesn't always win. And that's also one of the things that makes football one of the most popular sports in the world and enduring popular sports is because anything can happen in one match. Germany beat Brazil 7-1 in Brazil. So Brazil has lost World Cups at home twice. And yes, they went on to win it 6 other times in 6 other countries. France-Argentina, World Cup final 2022 was one of the most beautiful football games ever played. Argentina nominally won, but really both teams won. It was a draw. It was as close to a draw as could get. And when I meet fellow France fans and we meet each other who had watched the game together, we collapsed in each other's arms like it was one of the greatest afternoons in our lives because Argentina dominated, France came back, Argentina scored again, France came back and scored again, and they went to overtime and penalty kicks. Football gives everybody a chance in a way that most other sports don't. and that's what makes it artistic and poetic. And what I tried to do in my novel is bring out the poetic nature of football in the same way baseball and tennis have been written about in great novels. Great novelists have taken stabs at tennis and taken stabs at football and getting stabs at baseball and produced great literature. And I wanted to try to take a stab at that in my novel to show that football, because unpredictable, because the feet and the head can only do so many different things, and anything can happen in a football game. There's an element of art to it. It's more art than it is science in determining who's going to win a football game, who's going to score the game winner. Like, remember the World Cup final in Brazil? Germany beats Brazil in Brazil 7-1, but they barely beat Argentina in the final. They won 1-0 at the 116th minute, and the guy who scored the goal for Germany came off the bench, and he was out the game within a few years. So yes, football has an element of chance in it, and an element of art in it that gives anybody a fighting chance in a game. The U.S. showed it against England in 1950, and the most unlikely game winner came from a Haitian immigrant who wasn't even American. England was so favored in that game that the BBC did not even send a reporter to cover it. They told the reporters, "Hey, stay in Rio. The Belo Horizonte game against the U.S. is going to be a quick affair. It doesn't really matter." And
Yeah,
the
and
U.S.
of course,
shocked the
let's
world.
remember that this was played, and again, all the English schoolboys know this story, played in Belo Horizonte, the sixth largest city in Brazil. It was a brand new stadium, a small stadium, the Estadio Raimundo Sapao. So the provincial element here is also ironic, isn't it, Dimitri?
Yes, and I spent 3 weeks in Brazil researching this book.
Did you go
And
to Belo Horizonte?
I was in Belo. I was in Belo for 2 weeks. I walked in the field. I tried to imagine how the players spent their off days. I tried to see what you do on your off days in Belo, so I could imagine what the players were doing in their off days between matches. And it is a small city. It's a beautiful city. It's a quiet city. It's the least popular Brazilian city. But it proves to be the city where one of the greatest miracles in sports ever happened, which is the U.S. beating England. And I spent 3 weeks in Brazil researching that, including 10 days in Belo.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. You note that there haven't been that many good novels about football. One of my favorite is one by a Anglo-Hungarian writer, Tibor Fischer, Under the Frog, which is in some ways a book about the 1954 World Cup and the Hungarian defeat at the hands of the Germans. The Hungarians had the greatest team, just like the Dutch did in 1974, and both were beaten by Germany. What other books about? I'm not sure if you're familiar with this Fisher book, Under the Frog.
I am.
What other books, Dimitri, impress you? What other research? I mean, it must be
Fever
tough
Pitch.
going to Brazil, I'm guessing, to do research for this book.
Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby.
Yeah, I know that one.
It's a great novel about being a mad soccer fan. And I happen to be an Arsenal fan too. So
oh, you are? I haven't heard of them. What is Arsenal, Dimitri? What's that? Is that a disease?
They are currently in the first place in the Champions League and in England, 9 points clear of Manchester City.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with them. They must be a new club, are they?
They've been around for a bit and quite snake bitten. Right this moment, they're beating Bayer Leverkusen to move on in the Champions League. It's a famously snake-bitten team that plays beautiful football that seems to be on the verge of greatness this spring. So Fever Pitch is one of the novels that I refer to see that captures soccer madness very well.
Yeah, and of course, Fever Pitch was about growing up as a football fan in England, and it triggered a great fashion for football writing. It was never considered before to be sort of an art form, and it became one after Hornsby's book.
Massive bestseller, endlessly rereadable, and captures very much the madness of being a football fan. even if your team sucks. And also Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. It's a
It's about
novel about
tennis, is it, or about football?
it's about tennis. It's about the tedium and occasional flashes of graceful magic that happens in tennis, in a tennis player's life. And since my novel takes you inside the player's head and inside the player's day-to-day life, Infinite Jest does a great job of showing what it's like to be a world-class athlete in between matches, during matches, and after matches. David Foster Wallace was a high-level tennis player, and so he brought that insight into the life of the tennis player in the book and in his novel. And I wanted to bring that kind of insight into that lived-in experience in the life of Joe Gaëtjens and the people around him. Because loving a football player, being a football fan is one thing. Being a football player is so unique because you depend on 10 other players to help you score, but you get all the glory when you score. That dichotomy, those paradoxes, I wanted to show that in the book. And it doesn't exist. There aren't that many books about sports that put you in the skin of the athletes, the way I try to do it in this book.
And of course, as you know, Haiti is the background. Your first book was God Loves Haiti. This is also a book about Haiti and about Papa Doc, the man who ran your country for many years. What's the Haitian element here?
Well, in real life, Joe Gaëtjens had a great World Cup, came from a great family, went to New York, had a great World Cup, played in Paris professionally, came back to Haiti, ran afoul of Papa Doc, François Duvalier, and then got disappeared, never to be seen again. Because Papa Doc Duvalier is one of the things he did. He disappeared people. And
was he envious of him for his fame and fortune?
In my novel, our hero, he has a similar trajectory, but he actually confronts the dictator at some point in the climax of the book, face to face.
Don't give away the whole plot, Dimitri. We want people buying the book.
True. The interplay between politics and sports has a beautiful side, but also has very much a dark side. Dictators have used football, as other books have shown, to drape themselves in glory quite a bit. So Haiti is no different. So a world famous soccer player will, of course, trigger conflicting feelings with a dictator. And I try to illustrate that in the book. And it's something that's recurring theme in World Cup football. Simon Kuper writes about it. We're watching it play out in America this spring, and with the World Cup and the war that's going on, and
yeah,
the U.S. president loves football, loves this tournament.
Well, I'm not sure he loves football. I think he loves himself.
But he has a lot riding on this tournament. He wants this tournament to succeed, strangely enough. And we're going to watch conflicting feelings. Some countries going to want to boycott. Some countries going to want to come. And this is a recurring theme in football and World Cup history since it was founded in 1930.
You can't claim to speak on behalf of Haiti. I'm sure you wouldn't, and I wouldn't have the nerve to ask you. But given Trump's obsession with Haiti and his, what some people consider at least to be this horrible racism towards Haitian immigrants, what is the typical Haitian take on the tournament taking place in the United States and indeed the US in the tournament? Who do most people in Haiti follow? Would it be Brazil, France?
Brazil. Haitians, like most people from poor countries, root for Brazil. Because Brazil is basically a black team, and if you're African and Haitian and from other countries that don't make it to the World Cup, they're not favored to do well in the World Cup, you root for Brazil. However, this year has an interesting wrinkle because this year Haiti made the World Cup. Haiti qualified for the first time in
Oh, I
50 years.
apologize. So they're in the tournament.
They're in the tournament this year, and in fact, we play, and I say we, because as Haitian as the Caribbean sea is warm. We play Brazil, and we're in the same group as Brazil and Morocco. We're in the toughest group, but we play Brazil, which is going to be amazing. Um, Haitians' relationship with the U.S. is not unlike most people's relationship with the U.S., but the U.S. and Haiti, we're the same age. We started off at the same place. The U.S. rejected colonialism in 1776. We beat France in 1804. But our fortunes diverged quite a bit in the last 200 years.
Yeah, when you say you beat France, that wasn't in football, that was in real life. Yeah,
that was in war. And there's a beauty in football as a way to level up the playing field. For 90 minutes, when the Haiti plays Brazil, it's going to be like they'll have a chance to beat Brazil. They'll be in equal footing with Brazil for 90 minutes, at least at tip-off. And Haitians, like most people on the planet, they feel themselves worthy of any other country in the world. So when Haitians play in the World Cup, Haitians will feel proud, they'll feel equal to Brazil for as long as it lasts. And football has the quality, and sports in general has the quality of giving even the weakest and the poorest a fighting chance. And the World Cup has been a great place to see that play out. And Haitians will get to see that play out this summer when Haiti plays in the World Cup.
Well, there you have it. God will certainly be watching the tournament this summer. I think he'll probably be rooting for Haiti, certainly over the United States, maybe even over Brazil. Dimitry Elias Léger's new book, new novel, Death of the Soccer God, is a wonderful read. It's a very short book. It can be read. I read it in a couple of hours, although I sped read it, but it's a wonderful read. Dimitry is a very fine writer. He's made a name for himself in his first novel, God Loves Haiti. It's his follow-up book. Congratulations, Dimitri, on everything except being an Arsenal fan. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. This was wonderful.
Hi, this is Andrew again. Thank you so much for listening or watching the show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. We're on Substack, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the platforms. And I'd be very curious as to your comments as well on what you think of the show, how it can be improved, and the kinds of guests that you would enjoy hearing or listening to in future. Thank you again.